Hola a tothom. Hello everybody, thanks for coming. Moltíssimes gràcies per haver vingut. Abans de res, vull donar les gràcies a l'IAAC, a la gent, a les persones que ens han acollit o que ens hem acollit, perquè hi ha gent de l'Atlas que està a l'IAAC i gent de l'IAAC que està a l'Atlas, en aquell lloc on estem inventant o estem intentant inventar la ciutat del futur. Doncs moltes gràcies a l'IAAC i moltes gràcies a tota la gent que ha participat i que ens ha ajudat a que aquest acte sigui possible. Jo faré una molt breu presentació. De fet, us vull explicar un conte en només 3 minuts. Heus aquí una vegada 3 amics que volien treballar junts. Els 3 estàvem acabant projectes professionals i volíem fer alguna cosa nova. I ens va sortir que crearíem un projecte de mídia, de mitjans de comunicació, al voltant del futur. Així de senzill. De fet, volíem explicar el futur al món de forma divertida, perquè és un tema que quan ens hi hem acostat ens resultava absolutament fascinant i ens resultava una font inesgotable d'optimisme i d'energia. Acostar-se a cadascun dels milers de projectes que estan afrontant els reptes que té la humanitat avui és realment màgic. A més d'explicar el futur, hi havia una altra cosa que per nosaltres era molt important, que és que volíem defensar-lo. Volíem defensar el futur i volíem defensar la gent que treballa pel futur, la gent que és capaç de treballar a més de 5 anys vista. El futur, encara que us sembli estrany, està en perill d'extinció. Està en perill d'extinció com ho estan les balenes o com ho estan algunes plantes o com ho estan algunes tribus. Durant aquests anys de crisi i de pors, cada vegada el futur ha estat més lluny de la societat i només miràvem a terra per por a entrebancar-nos. I oblidar el futur és oblidar l'espai on els humans somiem, on inventem les coses que ens han fet ser el que som, on de fet hem sigut grans. I per això volíem explicar el futur i volíem defensar-lo. I la tercera cosa que ens proposàvem era intentar que el futur arribi a tot arreu, perquè estem convençuts que la revolució digital i totes les revolucions que vindran només tenen sentit o només seran realment revolucions si arriben a tothom, si arriben a tot arreu i són per tothom. I amb aquests 3 objectius, explicar el futur, defensar-lo i fer que arribi a tot arreu, vam inventar la Democratizing the Future Society, una societat que té la intenció, durant els propers 150 anys, per exemple, d'anar creant mitjans de comunicació al voltant del futur i que el primer que hem fet és aquest atles del futur que podeu consultar o que us podeu fer seguidors del Twitter o seguidors del Facebook si us ho mireu per internet. I clar, quan vam començar el projecte, els 3 amics aquests que estaven buscant un projecte per fer junts, doncs el primer que vam fer va ser aquestes idees posar-les al Google per veure si hi havia alguna cosa semblant. I la Cathy, ho recordo perfectament, va posar les paraules al Google Future, Optimistic, Fun, i tal qual, en la primera cerca va aparèixer màgicament el príncep blau d'aquest conte, Mark Stevenson. Un tipus que portava anys fent exactament això mateix que estàvem fent nosaltres, divertir amb el futur, reivindicar-lo, estendre'l per terra, mar i aire, en llibres, en programes de televisió, en tallers, en conferències. I clar, el vam trucar perquè la Cathy sempre diu que quan t'apareix un príncep blau l'has de telefonar. I amb la trucada vam descobrir que no només era blau el príncep, sinó que era molt i molt generós, com tota la gent llesta. I ens va dir a tot que sí. I des de llavors estem junts. Sense en Marc probablement no seríem aquí i crec que la conferència que ens farà avui explica més bé que ningú per què la Democratizing the Future Society que hem creat té molt sentit. Per què l'Atlas és només un primer passet i per què com a societat ens hem de fer nostre el futur i evitar així que s'extingeixi. Amb tots vosaltres, Mark Stevenson, el nostre príncep blau.
Good start for a futurist. Hello. Can we try that again? Hello. Before I start, I just want to get you all to turn around and look at the man in the booth who is translating. That is David. Say hello, David. There we go. I think translators are amazing people, and I also love getting them to translate how great they are to other people, because as an Englishman, he will find that completely embarrassing. So, I am a futurist. Apparently, I write books on the future, but I'm here tonight, as Oriol said, because I'm involved with the Atlas, and I advise other people as well. But I'm going to start with a man I met writing my last book. Here he is. This is Dick Rutten. Dick is a test pilot for high-performance aircraft. He's 75. And I was talking to him about the future of space travel. And he came up with this amazing quote during my interview that I want to share with you. It's quite a subtle point, and I must make sure I get the nuance right. So here it goes. He said this: Stephen Hawking is an asshole. Don't tell me I can't go faster than the speed of light. Fuck you. Never look at a limitation as anything you ever comply with. It is only an opportunity for greatness. Now, the first lesson here is never take Dick out for a drink with a physicist. The second lesson, though, I really like. Never look at a limitation as something you comply with. Look at it as an opportunity for greatness, because the story of the future we have at the moment is one of limitation. It's what's going to go wrong. It's what we can't do. It's the powers that are too powerful for you to fight against. We need a different story of the future. And that's why I'm so pleased to be here tonight, and why I'm so pleased to be involved with the Democratizing the Future Society. When we think about the future, we think about technology. And one of my favorite observations about technology was made by the English author Douglas Adams, who said there are three kinds of technology. Technology invented before you're born, not technology. Just there. Happy about that. Or no, actually, not even bothered about it. It's just the world we were born into. Technology invented between you being born and middle age. Very exciting. You can probably get a job out of it. Your grandparents don't understand it. For my generation, that's things like the internet. Very happy about those. And then technology invented after you're middle-aged, which is completely pointless and makes you angry. And for my generation, that's things like Twitter. Now, what I find interesting about that statement is that if you look at the people who decide the direction of society, of an organization, of a government, of a university, they're usually in the last category. And most of the people that they're trying to engage with are in the middle category. They're students, they're citizens, they're employees. And this is problematic, because they kind of own the narrative of the future at the moment, but their confusion is getting ever worse. And it's because technology is speeding up, and always has been, and always will, because each new technology provides the tools to make the next one quicker and quicker. And the way that we're probably most familiar with that in this room is what happens to computing power. So since I was born, we've had a 1 billion-fold increase in computing power per dollar, which is extraordinary. And it means now that computers can do things that we thought were impossible only a short time ago, like drive cars. So if I'd have said to the people in this room 5 years ago, computers will be driving cars, most people would have said, I don't believe you. It requires a conscious human being to drive a car. I'm just going to show you a quick video of some chaps being asked to try a driverless car, and it's the audio that's important here, so here we go.
The Ants team will never believe this.
Oh my goodness. Go is the right word.
Oh my god! What? It's driving itself.
So clearly, computers can drive cars. What I love about that clip is something that was said to me by a man called Salem Ismail from the Singularity University. He said, what you can hear in that clip is the sound of new technology hitting somebody's brain and changing the way they think forever. So we've gone from the impossible to the possible to legislation. So we're testing these cars on our roads in the UK now since February last year. In Nevada now, they're testing driverless trucks. And to me, this is interesting, because what does this say about the 3.5 million truck drivers that currently earn their living doing that driving, who very well might be out of a job in 20 years or less? I was working with an insurance company because I'm a masochist, and I asked the head of the insurance company, what happens if one or both of these is a driverless car? And he said, well, we have a problem because we insure drivers, and if there aren't any, it's a bit of a fucker on the balance sheet, quite frankly. I said, yes, but what's your biggest cost? He said, well, claims are our biggest cost. I said, where do most claims come from? He says, human beings being stupid. Human beings are terrible at driving cars. Most accidents are caused because we get distracted. My favorite example, when the text messaging system went down in Abu Dhabi over the weekend, so did the crash rate by 40%. The point I'm making here is that insurance company wasn't thinking about the future. It wasn't thinking about the big picture. It wasn't, as I call it, future-literate. And we need to be future-literate because each new technology asks us a question. And how we answer that question will determine the world that we get. It's not just happening in business, it's happening in sport. This is Oscar. Now, I'm guessing that Oscar will now not be remembered first and foremost for his sporting achievements. But he did compete in the Olympic finals at the Olympics in 2012 in London. And it was fascinating to me, and I've done some work with our Olympics body. And in that work, I was looking at what's happening with these technologies, and this paper leapt out at me. It said, we conclude the moment in athletic history when engineered limbs outperform biological limbs has already passed. I don't believe this is true yet. Somebody who agrees with me is Hugh. Hugh is the bionics professor at MIT in Boston. But when Hugh starts to do things like this on his legs, you realize it will be true very soon. In fact, this man, Marcus Rem, is currently having to battle with the Olympics authorities to prove that he is not enhanced. So we'll get to a point quite soon in sport where disabled athletes won't be disabled anymore, they'll be enhanced. Is that fair? I don't know. But the point is the Olympics officials I was talking to hadn't thought about that question, and therefore they weren't ready to come up with an answer. I'm going to this later in the year. This is the first Olympics for enhanced athletes. It's happening in Switzerland, very Swiss. The cost of sequencing the human genome has gone from $100 million to $1,000 in 15 years. The $1 human genome will be here by the end of this decade. This changes lots of things about medicine, which many people in the medical community are not really thinking about. But the thing that I find very interesting is that when sequencing gets cheap, you can sequence everything. And we're doing that. We've sequenced this creature. It's called Tetrahymena. Why am I showing you Tetrahymena? Because Tetrahymena is immortal. It's not completely immortal. You can stamp on it. You can put it in a sandwich. But it doesn't age. And it doesn't age because it controls an enzyme called telomerase. Now, we have telomerase in all our cells, but our levels go down as we get older. That's one of the reasons we age. It doesn't happen with this fella. We've worked out how it does that, and Stanford University announced a couple of years ago they are reversing human aging in certain human cell lines. And George Church, the head of genetics at Harvard, said recently that reversing human aging is now a plausible technology within the next 20 years. What does that do to the world? What does it do to retirement? Do we all still retire at 60 if we live to 120? Do we all start thinking a bit more seriously about climate change because we won't be conveniently dead when the trouble really hits? What does it do to relationships? Would any of us get married if we knew it was for 100 years? Yeah, I mentioned this to my mum recently. She said, I do love your father, but 60 years is a fucking long time. Do any of us want to see this? Now, those technologies are good for curing disease, but again, see, technology is not interesting to me as an answer. It's interesting to me as a question. And I want the question to be answered not by just scientists and politicians. I want it to be answered by us, which is why the work that these people in the front are doing is so very, very important. We're not just sequencing genomes, we're writing them, genetic modification. And one of the most interesting things that's happening there is we can alter the genetic code of a bacteria to eat carbon dioxide and water and excrete crude oil. This is not science fiction, which means that right now, this is off the Atlas, this is a project I put on there, Audi are making diesel from the sky. They're taking those components, the water and the carbon from the sky, they're putting it through something called the Fischer-Tropsch process, a German process invented in 1929, to make fuel from the air. This is the place where they do it. The Solar Fuels Institute, who coordinate a lot of this research, say that these fuels will be commercially viable, as cheap as our existing fuels. They reckon, it's the orange line, by about 2023. I think that's optimistic. My best guess is 2040. Nonetheless, in our lifetime, we'll be able to take fuel from the sky, and you have to ask yourself, what does that do to the world? Again, there are no right answers, but it's a very interesting question, especially when you look at what's happening to the cost of solar power. This is an exponential graph, a logarithmic graph. Solar power has been halving in price about every 2 or 3 years since 1870, quite regularly. We're at 2% solar at the moment worldwide, but it's doubling in capacity and halving in price. Which means that we're probably about 20 to 25 years away from cheap solar energy for everybody. What does that do to the world? The utilities companies and the fossil fuel companies don't like this. This is a report they wrote about solar in America. I'm going to give you the executive summary of that report now. And the next thing that the fossil fuel lobby will tell you is that, but with solar and wind, you need batteries, otherwise we don't have the energy when we need it. We need to store the excess, and the batteries are no good. Along comes Mr. Musk with this. This battery is no good. It's not good enough yet. In fact, they've withdrawn it from the market. But if you look at the trends in battery technology, it will be good enough by 2025, problem solved. Which means ubiquitous, cheap, renewable energy, if we want it, if we answer that question well. Which means you can start to do things like this. This is another Atlas project, greening the desert. Because we can desalinate water cheaply, we can bring that water into the desert, so on. And then the next thing that happens is the internet. This is invented by this man. He also co-invented the internet. He's called Bob Metcalfe. This is the idea of taking an internet model and applying it to the energy grid, allowing us all access to energy to buy and sell and trade, something that Spain is not very good at the moment. But we're pretty good at it in the UK. We've just built an internet. This is on the Atlas again. Just on its first trial. It works. And they've already built it in the Netherlands as well, and the people using it are getting their cheap renewable energy, cheaper than the utilities. There's a reason that Saudi Arabia said last week that they were getting out of oil. and investing in renewables. As their former oil minister said, the Stone Age did not end for the lack of stone, and the oil age will end long before the world runs out of oil. This is why Morgan Stanley is saying the utilities are in real trouble. Morgan Stanley, not big greens. UBS is advising its customers to invest in solar now. So this energy revolution is coming, and that might change everything about how the future works, and that's good, it's optimistic, but we have to keep fighting for it so it's owned by us and not by them. We have a manufacturing revolution coming, so these are 3D printed car parts in titanium, 3D printed body parts. These people 3D print human organs, little livers and kidneys at the moment. I had lunch with the guy who runs this. He says, give me 10 years, I will print you the human heart. Not the one you have now, something better. Will athletes be going to him to get new hearts? Is that fair? I don't know. 3D printed dresses. This has just come out. This is a 3D printer that can assemble pretty much any molecule. This is another project I put on the Atlas. The most important company in the world you've never heard of. They're called Nanoscribe. They 3D print on the nanoscale. This is the scale of microchip components. The first thing they printed was that replica spaceship from a not very successful science fiction movie called Wing Commander. That tells you quite a lot about the people who work at Nanoscribe. Then they're printing things like this. This is a scaffold for holding individual cells. And now they'll sell you a printer that will print components for microchips. Simple components, quite expensive, but we know where this is going. This points to a world, probably in our lifetime, certainly our children's, where 3D printers will be able to print all of the components required to assemble 3D printers. And if you couple that with the energy revolution I've just talked about, it means that all our assumptions about how we run the world pretty much are up for grabs. Which means, for instance, and this is another Atlas project, you can start to give even the world's poorest people access to the best technology through open source and through cheap technology and 3D printing. This is a great project on there, the Refugee Openware project. So you have to imagine a world, I'm going to get you to imagine a world where your mobile phone never runs out of power because it has a solar panel on it that's so good, where that mobile phone can give you a blood test. And based on that blood test, you can download the design of a drug and print it at home. That's not science fiction. We can already power our phones with solar. Actually, Alcatel are about to release this phone in the next few months. It doesn't have a battery. It has a battery, but you don't charge it using the mains. It charges via a solar panel that's also the screen. There already are blood tests for mobile phones. This is one for glucose for diabetes sufferers. These are now combining all these tests into single devices. This is just released, the Scandu Scout as it's called. And last year, Aprecia Pharmaceuticals released their first 3D printed drug. So this is all coming. None of this is science fiction. By the way, this also means that by the time your kids are your age, they will be able to print their own recreational drugs. And this is a parenting challenge you have probably not considered. So the digital revolution, which was, interesting, I have to tell you, was really just the cocktail sausage before dinner. It was the hors d'oeuvre. The same level of power and the distribution of that power that we saw in the information world is going to come to the physical world and the energy world. And that has some interesting implications, not least that it changes the definition of power and wealth. So I work with quite a few billionaires, and they want to increase their influence in the world. But then you ask them the question, what happens when the average citizen has a 3D printer that can print a 3D printer and cheap energy more than they can use? Your ability to influence them because of the amount of money you have has been radically eroded. And so the smart billionaires are now increasing what they call their social capital. because they've realized if they want to be influential, they have to say important things about healthcare and climate change and inequality. This is why you see this massive upswing in philanthropy from the super rich. It's not because they all grew a conscience. This revolution that is coming, which potentially could be owned by us and not by them, it means, as John Seeley Brown says, this is my favorite philosopher in America, he says, nearly every social and technical and business infrastructure we have can't survive. Everybody happy? Now, when I'm working with my clients and I say things like this, they get upset because they say, but I'm already involved in one of those things. But my reaction is, great, thank God. Because you may have noticed that our current systems are a bit rubbish. They've got rubbish. They're no longer fit for the age we live in. I'll give you a few examples. We have a food system at the moment that wastes between 30 to 50% of the food we make before it reaches the human stomach. And at the same time, our hungry agricultural system is draining the water table in countries where half the world's population live. You think it's messy in the Middle East now, you wait until the water runs out. This is what our food system is doing. We have an energy system that is delivering climate change to us, thank you very much, and also is the biggest killer in the world. So air pollution, according to the World Health Authority, from fossil fuels, is a bigger killer than cancer. So that's not good. We have corporate environments who don't take the environment seriously. They don't take the planet seriously, which is a bit stupid because we need the planet in order to run a business. It's not the other way around. This is a report from Pavan Sukhdev, a brilliant banker. And he tried to work out how much we were taking out of the environment, how much we were spending, or how much that bill was going to be each year, and he works out that we're building up a bill of $4.7 trillion a year that we're going to have to fix. As this man says, this is Johan Rockstrom, he says the environment is starting to send back invoices. Here's a few. Hurricane Katrina, wildfires in Canada and Australia, flooding in Pakistan. I think it's quite nicely summed up by a cartoon I found, is this one. Yes, the planet got destroyed, but for a beautiful moment in time, we created a lot of value for shareholders. At the same time, we have corporate environments, we have businesses where, according to the annual Gallup survey, 87% of people don't like their job. 87% of people don't like their job. That doesn't sound like a system that's working. Why don't they like their job? Mostly because they don't believe the company they work for actually values the same things they do. We have a healthcare system or a drug system that has a 0.02 success rate in finding new drugs, and therefore says that it costs $2.6 billion to make a drug. What that means in rough translation is this. If you're an American who got fat, we have a drug for you because you can afford it. But if you're an African who got tuberculosis, you can die because you can't. This is the truth of our drug system. And we have education systems that are educating our children into a world that looks like this. So we do really need a different story of the future. And what will that be? What could it be? Well, Eleanor Roosevelt said, the future belongs to those who believe in the beauty of their dreams. I'm going to show you some people now who dreamed something different and have succeeded. This is all in my next book. This is the town of Güssing in Austria. 4,000 people, no economy to speak of. It was on its knees. They worked out they were spending quite a lot of money on fuel, so they decided in 1997, 20 years ago, to own their own energy system and move over to renewables. And everybody said, you are crazy. They've done it. They've had a few failures along the way, but they succeeded in the end. Now they have 1,000 new jobs. They reckon they spent 80 million. They reckon the benefit to town, 800 million. They own the system. They pay half the price for energy than their neighbors in the next town. This is what's happened to their carbon emissions. Even the Terminator is impressed. He says the whole world should become goosing. When I mentioned this town to my utilities clients, my energy clients, their reaction is something like this. So I talked about that drugs problem. This is the next book. This is again on the Atlas. This is open source drug discovery. So you remember I said they had a 5,000 to 1 hit rate in pharmaceuticals and it cost 26 billion? Well, open source drug discovery from Delhi in India have got a 100 to 1 hit rate. They crowdsource a lot of their research and they give away all of their intellectual property. They've got 17 new drugs in the pipeline. They've already identified 1 new drug for tuberculosis and they've spent less than $15 million. And when I mention this to my pharmaceuticals clients, their reaction is something like this. The food system can be made better too. This is Sudhir. I love Sudhir. I've just come back from seeing Sudhir. So the problem with farming, we're told, is there are too many small farmers. And they're living on subsistence. And what we need in order to make enough food is to buy up all those small farms, put them into big farms so that agricultural businesses can run them and have economies of scale. So here's a traditional farmer on the left. This is his field. You'll notice that this is the field next door. You notice that Sudhir is in a much more bountiful crop. This crop was not created with new technology or new fertilizer or genetically modified crops. It was created using permaculture or agroecology, just working with nature a bit more sensibly. Doubles or triples the yields, which not only is good for the world, because 56% of our food is made by these people, so we can double their output, but it's good for the local economy. It helps the poor rather than big agribusiness. In fact, this is Oliver. He wrote this amazing book for the UN called Agroecology and the Right to Food. He reckons that an average crop yield of 80% for farmers embracing these techniques that were in nature. As I said, this is good for the world and for the economies of developing nations. But if you mention this to, I don't know, Monsanto or a fertilizer company, this is their reaction. Here comes Bitcoin. I don't know about Bitcoin. I do know about the blockchain. The blockchain is just a big system of interlinked ledgers, which means every transaction is not recorded once, it's recorded hundreds of thousands of times, which means it's unhackable. Because if you want to hack the blockchain, you have to hack every ledger on the network. Which means you can create trust without trusted third parties, or as you and I call them, banks. We can create who trusts banks, by the way? Exactly, none of you. So these trusted third parties, we don't actually trust anymore. Now we have a technology to replace them. IBM called the blockchain the biggest revolution since the origin of general purpose computing. That's IBM. They know a thing or two about computers. If I mention this to my financial services clients, this is the reaction. They don't like it. The future is up for grabs. And it's an important time now. The information revolution taught us you didn't just have to be a passive consumer of stuff. You could publish, you could interact. Well, now you don't have to be a passive consumer of the future. You can interact. It's happening in every industry, in the media, in medicine, in manufacture, in energy, in banking, and everything else. It means that power is coming to us if we want it. But, as Spider-Man's uncle said, with power comes responsibility. And with mass power comes mass responsibility. You want to own the future? You have to take responsibility. This is a world where we have to think of ourselves as citizen and state, which is why the project that's based out of this building is so exciting to me, because this is the idea of a city created for the residents, by the residents. And it's happening in this building right now, the place where Atlas of the Future was born. This is the beginnings of a new revolution, the way to think about a future differently and to own it. It's very exciting. I'm going to finish with the good, the bad, and the ugly. I like Westerns. The bad news is that pretty much all of the institutions that we have at the moment are a bit rubbish. They're not fit for purpose, including the ones that we all work for. Well, not me, but you. The good news is we have all the tools we need to remake the world, and go and look at the Atlas, they're all there. And we have all the talents of people like you who want a better future, ready to go and make it. And the ugly news is, it's going to get really messy. So the next 20 or 30 years is going to get really messy, but that's okay, because we've got to build a better future, and that should be messy. I like this quote from Seth Godin. He says, increasingly there are two types of company, and you can mean two types of organizations as well. Brave and dead. The question is, which ones do you want to work for? Which ones do you want to form? Which side of history do you want to be on? See, the future, as I said, and technology isn't really an answer. It's a question. It's a mirror. And if you don't look into that mirror and you don't see a world of sustainability and compassion and humanity and justice and equality, then we had all better be prepared for the consequences. You see, optimism about the future is a moral position. If you're not prepared to imagine a better future, we can't make it. You're accepting that the future is no better than the present and probably worse. We must be, as Eleanor says, prepared to believe in the beauty of our dreams. Brave or dead? Your choice. Eleanor Roosevelt said, a great wind is blowing. That either gives you imagination or a headache. Not Eleanor Roosevelt, that was Catherine the Great. Catherine the Great said, a great wind is blowing that either gives you imagination or a headache. So my job this evening, I hope, is to give you a little bit of both. I'm going to end with two observations. One is an ancient Chinese proverb. When the winds of change blow, some people build walls, some people build windmills. This, I hope, is a room of windmills. These people here certainly are windmills, and the Atlas is full of windmills. Start building windmills, because the winds are blowing. But let's just go back to Dick to finish off with, which is, please don't look at a limitation as anything you ever comply with. It's just an opportunity for greatness. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Mark, for your very inspiring lecture. I hope that everybody felt a bit more brave after this. And so let's see if you are brave enough to ask some question to our guest. Is your moment. You can ask both in Catalan or English. Just you lift your hand and then bring you the microphone.
I'll get the ball rolling with a question, but I think it's an urgent one, which is, you mentioned the words humanity, justice, and equality, along with all of the technological revolutions that are happening and innovations that are happening. So in 500 or 1,000 years, do you think we'll be struggling in the same way with humanity, justice, and equality?
I don't know. The point is not for me to give answers. The point is to say, there are these questions, and depending on how we answer the question of the future, we'll answer your question. So the more of us that get involved in it, the more we democratize access to these technologies, the better things will be. Martin Luther King said, the arc of history bends towards justice. But he said the arc of history, it takes an awful long time. And all of those revolutions for good have come not really from governments, but from people demanding stuff of their governments. So I really don't know. But if everybody in this room decides to get on the right side of history, then we have a better chance than we did at the beginning of the evening, which is kind of the point of what these guys down here are doing. So, I don't know. Sorry, that's not really a great answer. Yes. How about that? Is that better? Any question?
Mark, how do you see the future of work in general in the next 15 years?
Oh, Oh, the future of work.
Yeah.
Well, that's interesting. I don't know, but I can tell you, I have a few thoughts. I just was invited to go and speak to Ernst & Young. That was exciting. Ernst & Young, and we came up with the idea of, because there's a lot of problem that corporations have. I also work for something called Escape the City, which helps people get out of boring corporate jobs and do something more interesting. And corporations phone me up and phone them up, and they say, we have this terrible, terrible problem. And then what's your problem? They say, all the really talented young people aren't coming to work for us. And they go, why? I mean, we give them good wages and health care and an iPad, and we don't understand. And my answer is, they're not coming to work for you because you're you. Because you've let it be known that what you value is shareholder value. You don't value humanity or compassion or justice. And increasingly, companies that are employing the best people are showing moral purpose, showing some ability to say, you know, there's a bigger game in town here. And it's slow and it takes time, but I'll give you an example of one company, very big company that's doing this, Unilever. Huge, massive corporation. They have lots of problems, still many things they're doing wrong. But their CEO, a man called Paul, stood up in front of the biggest business conference in the UK a few years ago and said, how much longer is business going to steal from our children's future? I am not going to do quarterly reporting. If you're a hedge fund, don't invest in me, I don't like you. I tell you what, I'm going to halve Unilever's environmental footprint, and I'm going to try and double our revenues at the same time. And everybody in that conference pretty much thought he was on drugs, or they at least split up with his wife or something. They're on that mission, and they're doing really well. They've got a long way to go, but they now do this thing called environmental profit and loss accounting. So not only do they account for their business accounts, but they work out, are we in profit or loss with water, energy, carbon? And what's really interesting is companies like Nestle and Procter & Gamble phone me up and go, I've got this real problem, Mark. What's your problem? All of our best staff are leaving and going to work for Unilever, and they're not even paying them anymore. What is that? So I think if we keep demanding it, work will have to show moral leadership, and that will be where all the best people go, and of course the best people create the most agile companies, so it's a kind of a win-win. The other thing that will happen with work is that companies increasingly won't compete with companies, networks will compete with networks. By 2040, 50% of the global population will be self-employed. We have to redefine what work is. It will hopefully be much more fluid. We'll take into account things like childcare, different patterns of working, because now we have the options through technology to do that. So those are my two things for the next 15 years, increasing moral purpose and networks rather than hierarchies. I hope that answers your question. I mean, but it's a big question. I don't know. Any other questions?
Hi, Mark.
Hi.
I appreciate your position being someone who delivers quite profound messages and then is asked, oh, well, what's the answer to this? And you can't answer it because you're just delivering messages, which is fair enough. But something I'm particularly interested in about what's happening is the millennial self-consciousness that seems to be emerging. The way I see that is through things like Bernie Sanders and the political revolution in the United States, to put it in a more traditional way, but there's something more than that, which is a self-realization of people our age. And the Fab Lab network and a lot of people in this room, I think, galvanized behind this idea of open source being a very strong proponent of our beliefs and our values. And like you just said about the Unilever thing, it's like purpose over paychecks. Like we're more drawn to things with purpose than things that are necessarily traditionally valuable in terms of the kind of cultocracy that we live in. So my question is, how do you see the specifically open source and the availability of knowledge and data and designs and tools being an incubator to this change you're talking about?
I think it's completely fundamental. I think, I could be wrong, But I think in 200 years' time, our great-great-grandchildren will go, you used to try and own ideas that could benefit people? They will look, I sometimes ask this question, which is, Mark, as a futurist, what do you think in the future people will look back on today and consider barbaric? In the way that we look back on, torture or, the things we used to do, the increasing levels of sexism and racism, and things that we thought in the past were bad and that we're trying to improve. And I think that there's two things. One will be ownership. Will be one of the things. The energy system is a good one. I'm sure that my grandchild is going to come to me and go, so Granddad, let me get this right. When you were a boy, to make energy, these corporations would dig stuff up out of the ground that was hugely dangerous for the people who did it. And they would burn it, which is really bad for the environment. And they do it in these big power plants, which only a few people could own. And then there was a wire, and you had to find the end of the wire. And if you didn't pay for the end of the wire, they'd stop you having energy. Is that right, Granddad? And you'll go, yeah. And they'll go, that's fucked up. It's coming out the sky for free. Why would any society organize itself that way? And it's because the point about open source is that our economy, the one we've grown up in, has been built on the concept of economies of scale. And there are many sensible reasons why that happened. Given the technology we had at the time and where we were in history, it made sense to do that. The energy system we have made perfect sense in 1930. It made pretty good sense in 1960 and 70 as well. Now with these new technologies, it doesn't. And so the next economy, I think, will be built on economies of distribution, the ability to get that stuff out there quickly to as many people. And that's what open source is really all about. It's an economy of distribution, not economies of scale, but economies of just getting it out there. And one of the projects I mentioned, open source drug discovery. There's an open source system of developing drugs. It could potentially save billions of lives. Open source energy, what's the biggest boost for an economy in the world? Cheap energy. So governments are slowly coming around to the idea that the energy companies are no longer powering the economy, they're restricting it. So it's going to be a long fight, but I think the millennials' belief in open source isn't just something that's kind of, oh, isn't it funky and new? It's like, no, this is the thing. It's in the water. It makes perfect sense because I'm going to be growing up into this world and I'm going to be having kids in this world, and I think we're going to have to change it. There's a more general point in futurology, which is, I don't know whether I quite agree with it, but it's a useful metaphor. And it's about 4 generations that some futurologists say happen in a cycle. The first generation invents something, internal combustion engine, and goes, that's fucking cool. I have no idea what to do with it. And the next generation comes on and go, we can build the British Empire out of that. They say, we will take those ideas that you came up with and we will make something with it, a new society. Then the third generation goes, this is good. I'm just going to chill out and actually not think about the big picture at all. That's my generation. And then, of course, that system doesn't quite work anymore. And then the fourth generation comes along, which is your generation, and goes, that's fucked up. I'm going to mess this up again. And then the generation after you goes, we built this new thing, and it happens at time. I'm not sure that entirely works, but I think there's something in that, and I think open source is part of that. This is fucked up. We're going to reinvent it. I used to be a musician, and I did a record with a record company, and now I'm doing my next record completely open source. It's far better, and I made more money. So there we go. Any other questions? Or I'm worried about David at the back now because he's now been translating for forever. Maybe so he probably needs like at least 7 whiskeys.
Well, so thanks a lot, Mark, for your lecture, and hopefully we will welcome you again in the future because you're so aligned with what we do here. So let's now help me to thank Mark for his lecture.